Welcome to the Big H podcast. This is your host, Mike Heiss, and I'm joined here by Rick Jordan of villageradio.net, who seems to be wanting to get contacted right now. But RJ, if you got to take it, you got to take it.
Let me just stop the call. Hold on. Be right back.
Okay, buddy. RJ is back from a recent vacation, and we're really super glad to have him. And as I aforementioned, he is the owner and operator of villageradio.net and has been doing that for a number of years. So we're going to ask him some questions and get his take on the evolution of, well, his experience in radio and then internet radio and then the music business in general. RJ, just so the audience gets to know you a little bit, describe your upbringing, your education, and things like that, your family for us.
Grew up on Cape Cod. Just mom, dad, and I, spoiled only child, and great place to, kind of grow up, kind of nature's playland right there on the water. And I ended up going to a private prep school, high school called Cape Cod Academy, which really brought me out of my shell a bunch because it was small class sizes. I think I had the largest graduating class in the history of the school. We had 7 graduates. So,
wow.
Yeah. And while I was there, I developed a great love for music. I had teachers who fostered that. One teacher in particular, Mr. Aiello, who played in a bunch of bands back in the 60s in the Boston area. And so we had bands in school for our theater productions, and he assisted with our garage bands to kind of help us out. And so during that time, I was listening to a college radio station on Cape Cod, and they had a contest on, and I knew the answer to the trivia contest. I called, I won an album, and when I showed up at the radio station to pick up the album, I looked at the radio station and something just spoke to me, and I'm like, I need to be doing this. This is a good fit for everything I love. And so I started volunteering there, and that was kind of when everything began, and that was late 1984.
Do you remember what that album was that you won on the trivia contest question?
Road to Ruin by the Ramones, which says an awful lot about me and an awful lot about where Village Radio is today in 2023. That album in particular, but
well, definitely, I look forward to moving up into the broadcast with that. You said that you had that teacher that inspired you with music. Did you play an instrument yourself when you were younger?
I did. I played guitar. You can see I have a couple hanging behind me here. Played guitar in all the school music productions, and actually had my first band when I was only in junior high. But in high school, we actually, there's sometimes timing is perfect and luck happens and there's something in the water. And we had 2 kids in our band. They were brother and sister, and their dad was kind of famous. John Savage, the actor from the movie Deer Hunter, and their uncle
I've heard of the movie.
Okay. Well, their uncle was Robert Duvall, who I'm sure you know. And
absolutely,
so they got to hobnob with people and hang out with Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel, and just a super artistic family. Dad was an actor. Mom was a traditional artist, a painter, and they were just amazing. And as a matter of fact, Jennifer, the sister of the sister and brother duo, you might remember her for playing the oldest daughter in the TV show Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. But she is still,
absolutely.
She, the blonde girl, she is still a practicing musician. So we had a drummer who could play every Rush song in the world when he was 14 years old. I mean, he was probably 4 feet tall, but he was insanely good. So we actually had a better than competitive band in high school. And the story I love to tell is that we competed in the Barnstable County Fair Talent Contest in 1984. And 1985, and we won it. We won the talent contest. We beat everybody else. 30 years later, another young girl from Cape Cod competed in that contest and won it. And her name is Megan Trainor.
I've heard of her for sure. It's
All
all
about
about
that
that
bass.
bass. Oh yeah,
So I love to tell people I won the same talent contest she won just 30 years earlier.
very good. It's a good claim to fame. Did you ever take your chance on vocals, or you just stayed back with the guitar?
Uh, okay. So I used to think I could sing.
It's
And
all that matters.
one day I was in another high school band and we were down in the basement and the our drummer went upstairs to grab a drink and he came down and said that his mom wanted me to stop singing because I was terrible. You guys need a singer. Rick can't sing.
Hey,
And
well,
so
honesty is good.
what's that?
Honesty is good, I guess.
Honesty is good. So I mean, I remember in one band I did sing like an Elvis Costello song, but they never wanted me to do background vocals because I'm chronically flat. So it is what it is.
But I do have to say, from just the few volunteering I've done, you got a great ear for sound, though. You're very particular in your sound.
Apparently not
So,
for pitch. For everything else, man.
well, you alluded to a little bit on Cape Cod when you met that music teacher inspiring you. Explain a little bit more on your path into radio, different cities, states, maybe where it took you to and when to college and everything like that, and how it really started to branch out for you.
Well, after the college station, I found a job the next summer, and it was kind of fun. It was a little AM news talk station on Cape Cod called WOCB, and I basically ran the TalkNet satellite programming and read the weather and a PSA at the top of the hour. Got a little more on air experience, and the cool thing was they had me on that summer from 7 to midnight. So my days were free. And the college station I mentioned, all the college kids wanted to go to the beach in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wanted to be at the radio station. So I would show up every morning. There were two gentlemen on that would they would have the Cape Cod Times and they would read it on the air for the benefit of the blind. And so when they would get off the air at 9 a.m., there wouldn't be anybody to go on the air. They would shut off the transmitter and go home. So I used to just show up and say, keep the transmitter on. And I would stay on the air. My dad would drive me into Hyannis, Mass, where the college was. I'd go on the air at 9 a.m. He'd bring me lunch at noon on his lunch break and then pick me up at 5:45 in the evening, where I would shut the transmitter off, go home, grab dinner, and then go to WOCB to be the little board op at night. So for that summer of 85, I was lucky enough to be on the air every single day that summer on two radio stations. And that is where the bug got me. That's where the college record reps would call the radio station. And so I would take the call. I was the only one there. I kind of became the de facto music director. And then, you know, a record label would send some 45s to give away or some albums. And I'm like, well, we need to do a contest. So I would produce a promo and write a liner for it. And I was the only one reading it. I was the only one on the air that summer, but I would execute the so all of a sudden I was the de facto promotion director and de facto production director. And so by the end of the summer, I was kind of programming this radio station that had a 200-watt signal right in the middle of Cape Cod. And I was basically the only one on it for the entire summer. So it was kind of cool. And that's where I caught the bug. And then I got a job soon after that at the big top 40 station on Cape Cod, where I had the honor of handling the illustrious duties of the Saturday night overnight from midnight to 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. And then went off to college in Ithaca, New York, Ithaca College, studying communications. Worked at a couple of stations in town, took a bus on the weekend to Rochester to work at WPXY, and it just kind of all snowballed from there. So the resume right now is difficult to look at because I don't know what's too old to keep and what call letters are relevant and which ones aren't. But all in all, I've worked at over 20 radio stations, and I've been lucky enough to be the sound architect or the program director of 8 of them.
Now you mentioned 20. Was it 20 different stations?
Yeah, I think 21 or 22 at this point.
Explain to the audience a little bit. Your email address is RJ at Grassroots. What do you do during your day job? What's your day job now, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I'm a record promoter. I used to work for record labels, and that requires a lot of travel. I was a independent record promoter. I was what was called a Northeast regional. So I worked for some independent labels where I would have a bunch of radio stations within the Northeast in my territory. And I would have to convince them to add my records to the playlist, start spinning them. And then once they did start playing it, play them more. Because the more you play a record, the more it moves up the chart. And the problem with that was I kind of lived on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to do that anymore. So I got back into radio until I found the job which I have now, which is secondary record promotion. We work with the smaller markets instead of the larger towns, small town radio stations. And I'm able to handle the entire country over the phone and via email. So I don't have to leave the house, which, as you know, knowing me, Mike, I'm not very social. So I love that.
Right.
And that's what I do all day long. I kind of push boulders up a hill. The way it works, the simple explanation is the song with the most amount of plays in a given week is the number one song that week.
Mm-hmm.
Second most played, number two song. And so my job is just to move songs up the chart, to obtain and manage airplay at a chart panel of a certain amount of radio stations, which I now have relationships with from calling them for the past 7 years. And we work with a variety of artists at any given time. I have a kind of a large roster of artists that all have current singles that are all going for airplay.
And then you explained that you were a secondary label person now.
Secondary radio is what the industry calls a small town station.
Okay, can you describe or give me some examples of some small towns that you work with?
Well, a couple of stations I used to program. There's one in Selinsgrove, New York. There's one in Warsaw, New York. Hang on. See if I can find some interesting ones here in my call sheet that I can read to you.
I definitely heard of Warsaw.
Watertown, New York, Lubbock, Texas, Florence, Alabama, Savannah, Georgia, Weatherford, Oklahoma, Warrenton, Missouri, places like that. You know, within the shadow, Warrenton, Missouri, that station is really only about 45 minutes from St. Louis.
Okay.
But it's not a St. Louis radio station. It's a Warrenton station.
Now, you said that you wanted to kind of get out of traveling so much. Do you do any traveling at all now?
I get to go to Nashville once or twice a year. There's a radio conference in February every year called CRS, which stands for Country Radio Seminar. And we basically go and drink a lot of beer and obtain go to a bunch of seminars and see a bunch of acts play. And so radio stations come into Nashville that week, and we're able to kind of bond with them, have fun with them, and give them some one-on-one FaceTime with the artists we work with.
I got you.
And then sometimes I go down in the summertime for CMA Fest, which back in the day was called Fan Fest. But that Nashville is a zoo. And as you know, I'm not very social. So I try to skip out on that whenever I can.
I got you. And there's nothing about, you know yourself, that you don't want to be out and about and being social like that. So,
well, prior to COVID, we would have a lot of radio stations come into town for CMA Fest. After COVID, not so much. So you kind of look at the situation and you're like, well, if I had 15 stations in town that I could introduce my artist to, I should be there. But if only 2 stations are coming in, why am I doing it?
Exactly. Describe a little bit about the evolution of internet radio.
It's actually rather old at this point. The first internet stations popped up in the late 90s. And for those people who hopped on the bandwagon at the time, they incrementally gained listeners over the years. I have a friend who if you knew what his listening stats were, insane. And I think he started the radio station back in 1996. Right now, it's kind of a crowded realm, kind of like podcasting is. But what you found with your podcast is you found a specific audience. You're not trying to talk to everybody all over the world. You're trying to talk to people who live in Hilton. And so it's kind of important to find a programming niche and do something which isn't being duplicated elsewhere. And so, yeah, I mean, if you were just to Google internet radio stations, you would see a bunch of different directories, and you would literally see thousands of stations. And many of those stations probably have about one or two listeners a day.
Mm-hmm.
Village Radio is lucky because I think we made some really good choices with our format. And we have probably about 3,000 listeners, anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 listeners a month, and about 150 to 200 listeners a day.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Describe a little bit about how you went about developing your station, villageradio.net, the changes that you went through. I don't know if I can say changes in format, but I think I
Yeah.
remember you were 80s. You started doing some broadcasts for sporting events, and then I think you're alternative rock now.
Yeah, well, we're classic alternative. So the way it started, which you know because you were involved from the very beginning, was when I left radio. I didn't want to get. Are you hearing a little bit of interference on my
No,
microphone? Okay, maybe it's
no.
just me. Let me turn my headphone down just a little here. Okay. So initially, when I left radio as a full-time profession, I knew that it would suck me back in because it always had in the past. And I didn't want it to. I wanted to continue working here at Grassroots. And I thought I was suited for it for a lot of reasons. And radio just stresses me out and my family doesn't get the best version of me. So I
Right,
thought, okay, if I can create a radio station in my house, that I can do all the things I used to do when I was at a terrestrial radio station, why not? And we had moved to Hilton a few years prior and realized a couple of things. First of all, we didn't really know anybody in town. I was commuting every day to go to work in Warsaw. So it was about an hour and a half down, an hour and a half back. So I had a 3-hour commute every day. And we had a son who was in the school system, and we didn't know the parents of any of his friends. And so we figured this would be, if we targeted the village of Hilton, which seemed very doable, we figured we could kind of use it as a vehicle to develop a little bit of a social life for us. And also, I saw that there were some needs. I wanted to be famous for something that no other radio station could do or would want to do, and that was Hilton High School sports. If you're a terrestrial radio station in Rochester with a 50,000 watt signal, you can hear that radio station all the way from the tip of Pennsylvania, all the way up to the Canadian border. And why would you want to air high school sports for a small portion of your audience on let's say a Friday evening, a football game? You wouldn't,
right.
because you would basically discount every other person listening to your radio station, and it would hurt the amount of listening your radio station could achieve. But for an internet station, well, we would have a captive audience. Particularly in the story I always like to tell is, if it's a rainy or a snowy night in the middle of February and the cadets are playing an away game, basketball or hockey,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not going to want to get in your car and drive through the snow. So if you could hear
Mm-hmm.
that game on the radio, there would be an audience for it. So that was the initial idea.
And the initial idea, of course, it did take off. I remember starting with football, and I was one of the play-by-plays or whatever, and then it got an audience, and then people started approaching me to approach you to do other sports,
Sure.
and that was nice in effect. But tell us a little bit about how people
Well,
don't always understand. It's not the 2-hour broadcast you're listening to that's behind everything.
so yeah, I mean, football and basketball are big in this town. Hockey too. We decided we would do every football and basketball game home and away, and then kind of take the summers off to relax, but we could air assorted, baseball games in the spring. And in between men's varsity football and men's varsity basketball, particularly basketball, we could air some female varsity games, some girls varsity, and some hockey games. But there would be no way to do every single sport because we'd never leave the studio and everybody was volunteering their own time. Sometimes less is more. Do what you can do well, and when you overextend, nothing is done well. So it was a good problem to have that people did, and the community reached out. We ended up DJing the car cruise nights at the Hilton Diner. I think on Friday or Saturday nights, and broadcasting live from Apple Festival. What happened
Correct.
was, be careful what you wish for. It became a
Right.
real radio station,
Right.
even more than I think. I mean, do you have a transistor radio in your pocket right now? No, but you got one of
Hmm.
these. So you can listen
Right.
to the radio station immediately. The world has
Hmm.
changed. We are connected in different
Right.
ways. So it just, after about 3 years, I felt like I had two very demanding full-time jobs. And I felt like I needed to take a step back. So we turned Village Radio not off, but in terms of Hilton, we turned off all the Hilton content and just became kind of an 80s jukebox. And hindsight being 2020, we would have been forced to change our focus anyway during COVID, because that's when
Hmm.
YouTube happened and all the games were on YouTube. And so listening to the games on the radio wouldn't have been as special anymore, for sure.
Gotcha.
And then something interesting happened after just a few years of the radio station being kind of a play toy, something that I listened to and maybe a few others. I got called by that same radio station that I won the Ramones album from in
Hmm.
1984, and their tower had fallen and they were off the air. And the college wanted to know whether it would be worth putting a terrestrial radio station back on the air in 2023. And they didn't see the wisdom in it because they didn't see radio as being as popular as it had been in the past. And that may be true, but the population on Cape Cod is about 20 years older than the median population of America. So across America, the median population is 36 years of age. On Cape Cod, it's a retirement community. It's 56 years of age. I'm 55. I had a lifelong love affair with the radio. I know what radio is. I slept with it under my pillow at night, listening to faraway stations and ball games. And so I had an emotional attachment. I think the people on Cape Cod are old enough that they still do. Radio is a viable medium. So I said, you should absolutely re-erect the tower, put the station back on the air. But I questioned their block format that they had. They were trying to be all things to all people. Some days you tune in and get reggae. The other days you'd get polka, or you'd get
Hmm.
an offering that was already on a commercial station in the market, a successful commercial station. So why are you trying to duplicate something they do well 24/7 just so that you can do it 5 hours a week? So I said, stop the
Right.
block programming and find a format which is gold based. So in other words, older music that appeals to the available population on Cape Cod, and try to find a format that nobody's doing. And I said, I have a suggestion. Back in the day, this radio station played the Ramones and Iggy Pop and The Cure and Depeche Mode and the Sex Pistols, all these weird bands that weren't on the radio anywhere else. You know something? They're still not really represented on the radio in a large way, but all
Hmm.
those people I mentioned are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That kind
Hmm.
of music is important now, and it's called classic alternative. It's classic hits, but for the cool kids, the kids with the purple hair and the combat boots when we were in high school. And I said, I
Hmm.
think you'll have an audience for it. So they asked me to build it for them and figure out a way to be able to, since the college was on lockdown and the students couldn't come to the college, how could they remotely be part of the radio station? So we found some automation which was easy to use, that included remote voice tracking software, so people could record their air shifts from their home. And initially, what was really fun about that was, while the college students were being trained, the new recruits, so to speak, all the alumni from back in the day, we all got on the radio and all started voice tracking shifts. So when you listen to the station, it was the same people who were on 35 years ago playing the same music. It was kind of fun. But I did notice, after I handed off the radio station to the college and their staff, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and the sound of the radio station evolved in a way that worked for them, but personally, it wasn't what I had created. And I thought maybe I could create my own version using villageradio.net. So that's exactly what happened. And, they say, build it and they will come. There's a large community of people on social media who like that kind of music. reaching out to them, as well as some friends of mine in radio who reached out to me because they liked the format. We ended up with a full air staff, all remote, all over the country. We have disc jockeys on from 6 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Friday, and for a large portion of the weekend. And we actually are getting some opportunities. I have a celebrity disc jockey on the air, a guy named Clive Farrington, who was the lead singer of a band, When in Rome, that had a big hit in the 80s called The Promise. He's a disc jockey on my station, and he's been able to hook us up with different people. We actually were the presenting radio station of a concert in Los Angeles a few weeks back.
Sweet.
Persian Square. It was men without hats, a
Mm-hmm.
flock of seagulls, Doramarama, and we actually had a disc jockey on stage with a mic, with a Village Radio mic flag, wearing a Village Radio t-shirt, hosting the entire day. And the radio station logo was on the Jumbotron. And we're going to be hosting another concert on Labor Day in the Buffalo area. Men Without Hats are coming to an outdoor venue by the lake, and we're going to be hosting that as well. So it's been fun.
That is great. And did you attend in person to the award show? And do you plan to go to the Buffalo one, or you send people on?
I didn't go to the concert in L.A., but we have a gentleman named Jamie Wheatley he's one of our disc jockeys that actually MCs bands. It's kind of his side hustle, and so he kind of went out there on his own dime and went out to host the show. So it was a big deal, because when you're talking a concert in LA, normally you have to pay a hefty price if you want to be the presenting, sponsoring radio station. But the way this worked was the city of Los Angeles was putting together a concert festival, and the bands actually approached the promoter and said, take us as a package and we'll do all the production. So because of that, the bands were in control of how everything looked and sounded, and they signed us up and brought us into the situation. So we got the privilege of doing something that would have cost iHeart or Cumulus, thousands of dollars to buy into, and we got the opportunity to be part of it for free. We got very lucky.
Excellent. That's really exciting. When is that Buffalo concert or that show?
Labor Day.
Labor Day. That's right.
Yep.
Very good.
Monday, September 4th.
Okay. You mentioned, this is a pretty broad question, and I don't know how you can answer it, but you've been in the music business, I can probably say since 1984, 85.
Mm-hmm.
How has the music changed over the years?
Everything.
Enculturated our society.
Everything about music has changed. Everything. So I want you to listen to the radio now and remember the songs we liked back in the day. Songs like "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey. You hear those piano, dum 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 dum, and you crank the radio up, right? Well, nowadays you'll notice songs don't really have intros. They start with singing immediately or after just a couple of seconds. You'll also notice that songs start with a chorus before you actually get to the verse. There have been songs in the past where, the song starts and the chorus happens and then the first verse, but it hasn't been common. It was a fun device to make your song sound different. The reason for that is science. There is a technology called the personal people meter that Nielsen uses in the major markets to be able to put out a ratings survey for radio stations. So it happens in real time, and it can see when people turn the radio off. So when a song starts, if it takes too long to get to the meat, the hook, the sing-along part, people turn the station off and go to another station. So the phrase "don't bore us, get to the chorus" takes on a brand new meaning, So the way songs are written has changed over the years. Acts used to make money by selling hundreds upon thousands of records. We heard about gold records and platinum records, and you've been to my office and you've seen some of them on the walls. They don't exist anymore because people don't buy physical product. They stream everything. So you would get signed. You're in a band. A record label signs you. They give you money to go in and produce a record, and then hopefully it becomes a big hit and people buy it. And the record label makes the money back they invested in you, and you make a little money as well. Well, nobody's buying records now, so how are we making money? Well, the record label now doesn't sign you to a record deal. They sign you to a 360 deal, where all around they take a little portion of anything you do that you make money off of. And the large component of that would be touring. So now when you go on a concert tour, the record label takes a lot of the profit from the concert tour, where they hadn't done that in the past. So yeah, imagine a record industry that doesn't sell records. Everything has changed. Radio has changed. We used to have bodies in every building, and all radio stations were kind of separate. You would have maybe an AM and an FM, and that company could own an AM and FM and either a television station or a newspaper in a given market. And then they basically signed the Telecom Act of 1996. And when the government did that, you could now have a legalized monopoly of radio stations, which seemed to be a good thing, because with internet technology on the horizon and satellite television and all these other things, we thought there was going to be a lot of competition for the same amount of ad dollars. So let's make it a little bit easier for broadcasters. Let's put them all in one building. So instead of owning one FM in the market, that maybe you owned 5 now. So you only needed one building. You weren't paying rent on 5 different facilities. You only needed one secretary. You only needed one person in the traffic department to schedule the commercials, maybe only 1 or 2 production people, and you could share air staff amongst the radio stations. Well, that means less employees, which means less jobs. And then computer technology enabled people to do voice tracking. So you could literally be on 5 different radio stations in your building. And at the same time, you could be on radio stations across the country that you voice tracked remotely. So there became less and less opportunities to get jobs because the jobs all went away. So it's a totally different ballgame than it used to be. There used to be a culture in every radio station. In the building, you could feel a vibe. There was a swagger. There was a personality. Now, when you walk into a radio station, there's 1, maybe 2 on-air employees, and there is no culture and no camaraderie. And when you listen to the radio, I think you hear that lack of connection. The radio station doesn't seem like a living, breathing being, and it isn't as important to your life as it used to be. I used to think I had such a noble job. I was creating entertainment for people. I was comforting them. I was providing companionship. We were somewhere at that breakfast table with them in the morning. We were in the car with them on the way to work. We were their friend. We enriched their lives. We educated them. We entertained them. We informed them. And that's all kind of gone away. And it's sad. And radio still plays a role in people's lives, but I just don't think it has the impact that it used to have. And there aren't as many smart people in the business because there just aren't as many people working in radio anymore.
Wow, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think any job that you do, whether it's teaching or, RJ
Sure.
and his Village Radio, it's all about relationships, relationship building, and, what gets people through days and tough times, good times, whatever, is that type of relationship with others around you. And, flipping on that radio in the morning and listening to the on-air personality talking about their night before with their kids or whatever is interesting.
Right. Yeah. And I also think authenticity is interesting too. I've kind of mentioned I do some remote voice tracking. So I've done a bunch of it since COVID. I did a station in the Syracuse area, which is a market I used to work in, so I know the area. I did a station up in the Seaway Valley, up in St. Lawrence County, same radio station I programmed back in the 90s. So I knew that area and knew that radio station. And right now I'm on the air on a commercial station on Cape Cod. And, but I think I sound authentic on that station because I'm from Cape Cod. When I talk about a beach, I've been to that beach. When I talk about
Mm-hmm.
seeing a show at the Cape Cod Melody Tent, I've sat my ass in those seats and watched numerous shows. So I think I have
Mm-hmm.
some credibility. I sound like a Cape Codder. The problem you get nowadays is you have people from Des Moines, Iowa, on the air in Rochester, New York, that know nothing about Rochester, that have never been here, that don't know the lingo, that don't know what the Lilac Festival is. They don't know a lot of things, if you ask them what a growler is, they wouldn't know what a growler of beer was. But yet they're on the air in
Right.
Rochester, and they're supposed to be, they should know the lexicon, but because they have to voice track so many other radio stations around the country, they only have a fleeting association with what the Flower City is all about.
Well, the last time we talked, you presented a piece of paper that you had when you went to your first job or something. Do you happen to have that paper
Yeah,
to share with the listeners?
sure. Let me dig it out here. Hold on. I think the question that you asked related to if I would tell anybody what advice would I give people if they wanted to get into radio
Yes.
today? And I
Correct.
mentioned that I would, back in the day when I would speak in high schools on career days for kids who were thinking about getting into radio as a profession, the first thing I would say is don't turn back.
Mhm.
And so I came into possession of this back in 1986 when I was working at WPXY. A disc jockey came into the studio. He was supposed to go on the air after me, and he had a notebook with him, and he had this taped to his notebook. So I said, hey, can I borrow that so I can make a Xerox copy? And I've kept it all these years. And it really kind of talks about the life that you lead when you're in radio and how it isn't really all it's cracked up to be. And this is what it says. I tell you this, you've given up a lot in your life to be in radio. Your youth has probably been sacrificed. Most of you were never teenagers. Your marriages have either been ruined or many are in bad shape. Your social life stinks. Your holidays and weekends are never truly free. You worry, you fret, and you can't even escape it all by turning on the radio because that's your job. That's work. So you've given up the sheer beauty of life, its golden moments and precious gifts that can never be recaptured. You've alienated yourself from parents who wanted better things for you in life and may have since passed on, seeing you out of work and unhappy so much of the time. All of this you've sacrificed. And what's the return? You're underpaid and not even having the fun you thought you'd have. So get in there and let her rip. Turn up those headphones and zap that audience into doing something wacko. Play that favorite record that doesn't research worth crap and play it loud and proud. You're in radio. Radio's your life, damn it. Like it, live it, or you'll die a sad, bitter, unfulfilled man. What are you waiting for? And it's kind of true.
And well, good. That was my last question was, you know, this many years later, is that how you feel?
Yeah, radio is an addiction. It's hurt my relationships with people in the past. You move from town to town. You're a little bit of a nomad. I mean, we all know disc jockeys like Dave Kane that have been in Rochester forever,
Mm-hmm.
and good for him if he can do that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not the norm. You
Mm-hmm.
move around. Back in the day, you would move around because there would always be a better job and a better opportunity and a chance to work with more talented people and learn more. Nowadays, you're looking for a job because you're out of work. There are so many people in this industry that didn't get out and didn't look at it the way I did. I moved from the bigger markets to the smaller markets because I thought they were more secure. That I could walk into a market that maybe I was overqualified to work in, maybe had a larger knowledge base than some of the people who are already there. So that would give me value and I would be more secure there but other people didn't do that. And now they're nothing wrong with working at Home Depot or Lowe's or selling real estate or driving for UPS, but people who kind of held on to those big market radio dreams. I'm important. I'm in a big market and didn't give them up. That now radio has turned their back on those people. And I feel badly about that, but it's a high stress profession. Radio is a brick and mortar business, which is on the air 24/7, 365 days a year. So when
Hmm.
you work in radio, particularly if you're in a program director, that you never shut your doors. You never go on vacation. The radio station is always on the air, and that's a hefty responsibility to have. And that kind of stress can really have a bearing on your relationships with other people. I moved Melissa, my lovely wife, who you know. I met her in Syracuse. We moved to Portland, where I programmed a radio station there, then back to Syracuse. And then it was time to kind of get out, to not be moving
Hmm.
all over the place. I had done the moving as a young man before I got married, and it was time to find something different. And luckily, I was able to take my skill set in radio and apply it to records. And I think, I want to give myself a lot of credit for making the right decisions. A lot of times they were by accident and I just got lucky, but I'm real glad where I ended up because I'm secure in my job. I'm still part of radio in some way, shape, or form every single day. But I don't think I'm in danger of losing my job or putting my health at risk by being involved in it.
Well, RJ, I definitely think you made the right decision. And yes, I do know your lovely wife and your fantastic son, Riley. And it's always been good volunteering for you, getting to know you. And I'm super glad that you were my first guest on the Big H podcast with a face and a voice.
Thank you. It was fun to be here.
So, well, good, RJ. So this has been Mike Heiss for the Big H podcast. We'll be back in future weeks with future topics. Good day.